Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, water sprite from the planet Ocean, where I spend my timeless hours drifting through underwater labyrinths in search of a love capable of vanquishing all suffering as I surrender to the hallucinatory magic of an infinite phantasmagoria. But when not caught up in the coral caves of my own subaqueous dreams, I also occasionally rise to the surface to discuss astrology. And today we are talking about Sun conjunct Neptune, where the boundaries between self and the infinite ocean of other become dangerously dissolved. Now, many of us have been raised in a reality in which we are taught to commit to the dogma of disenchantment, where we are told that magic does not exist, that surrealism exists solely as an art movement, and that there is no mystery that cannot be rationally explained. Everything has been demystified, and anything that hasn't yet surrendered to the ratiocinations of science is either something we simply haven't discovered enough about yet, or something we had better repress and ignore as it threatens to circumvent the nice structure that we have built around a comprehensible reality. And this is one of the things that we can use facts and logic to imprison reality into a fixed shape. And much of this has to do with fear. The fear that if we cannot explain something, then we cannot control it. But the problem is this leads to an awful lot of reality being edited out, especially a very core part of us called our emotions. Emotions are illogical, emotions are strange, emotions do overlap into other people's, spilling from our cup into theirs. These things are not easily fitted within nice frameworks and boundaries, and they are so often aligned with all kinds of strange feelings and visions and mystical experiences, always lingering in the back of our minds. But when the Sun is conjunct Neptune, the essential mystery of our own consciousness rises up within us as a flood. All of those buried substratifications of our minds, and especially our hearts, come rising to the surface. The Sun usually defines the notion of us as being a single self that is separate from the rest of the universe. We can see this in terms of the actual glyph for the Sun in astrology, where it is a circle with a dot in the middle. So even though it has this seemingly endless circumference, it has this dot which gives it a sense of being finite, of having a point of containment, of having limitations that make it an ostensibly fixed thing in which we can safely pour the waters of our own experience. However, Neptune puts us back in touch with the collective ocean of feeling. Just as Uranus controls the collective mind, Neptune is the collective heart. And this is why dreams and prophecies and mystical experiences and sudden divine afflatus can strike us so strongly during Neptune, because the bounds that we usually employ to keep these things at bay become dissolved and effaced, and things that we would normally try and block out instead are able to reach us, and things that we normally try and keep crushed down inside where we don't feel they can do any damage come flooding out of us. And this has a way of subverting the apparently rigid hierarchy of how we experience reality. For most of us, we are taught that only the earthly realm matters, only what is physical and solid and tangible and capable of being touched is real. Everything else is just fantasy and illusion and fiction. And yet, when Neptune is on the scene, the other world, the world of dreams, the world of the imagination, the world of one's own fancy, all these images that rise up spontaneously within us, that is the world that seems far more real because of how intensely it is amplified by Neptune's existence. And therefore, people who often have Sun-Neptune aspects natally feel a much stronger connection to that other world, which functions according to a certain dream logic and an emotional logic that may make much more sense to them than the apparently fixed and immutable rules that govern physical reality. Physical reality can seem strange and unyielding, whereas there is a certain freedom to the dream logic of the Neptunian realm, is that we only have to think something and immediately it appears in the fantasy cinema of our own minds. Things can take one shape and then move on to another. But this also means that if the sun is representing ourself doesn't necessarily have a fixed shape either. It's not this thing that can be pinned down. It is protean, it is polymorphic, and the shape that it takes and the feelings that arise naturally from it have a strong way of responding to whatever is coming in within one's psychic or physical environment. I remember a girlfriend of a friend of mine being annoyed at him for being a Pisces, because she said whenever someone came in the room, he would completely change his behavior and his personality according to who that person was. And there can be this sense in which the ocean of Neptune swirls and moderates itself to fit in and fill in the gaps of whatever is going on around it. So Sun Neptune people do have this almost psychic ability to intuit someone else's fantasies and then therefore feel this compulsion to bring them into being, to embody them for that person. Because someone with Sun conjunct Neptune has this deep drive for an incredibly spiritual intimacy, not just with other people, but with the whole vast choir of life singing back at it. The people-pleasing aspect of Venus, with Neptune being the higher octave of Venus, can be magnified to an almost mystical level. That if I can turn myself into the object of your fantasies, if I can make myself an archetype on which you can project all your dreams, then you will love me and you will naturally want to fuse with me and give me all the nurturing and divine mothering which my soul is craving to experience. This oceanic empathy is capable of generating the fruit of a truly unconditional compassion that is capable of giving itself to everyone and everything. Because Sun conjunct Neptune puts us so in touch with our own inner oceans, with our own inner wounds, it feels the resonance singing back to it from the antiphonal voice of the collective suffering. It feels its own suffering and it feels the responsivity of the suffering out there in the world. And therefore, when we see someone acting in a strange or an erratic way that has caused them to be rejected and exiled by the rest of society, whereas in a Saturnian mood, we might think, well, probably serves them right. I bet they did something to put themselves in that terrible position where no one wants them and no one loves them. In a Neptunian phase, we're more likely to look at that person and say, in another lifetime, or indeed in a later phase of this one, that person could be me. Their suffering is but a symbol of a type of suffering that I feel as well. Their impoverishment, their addictions, their cravings, their strange neuroses that have brought them to this critical state of dejection and failure are all mine as well, just in a different form, like a chord that has been restructured at different levels of intervals within the orchestration of a piece of classical music. But it's interesting to see the myriad different ways that we can then respond to this intense compassion and empathy that we feel with the rest of their life. Some people feel motivated to do something with it. They feel they have so much to give and are so overwhelmingly and sensually aware of the suffering of the rest of the human race that they almost feel this responsibility to be the savior of it, to be the one who will awaken them, who will be a spirit of healing for the good of all mankind. And that is a huge amount of responsibility to take upon oneself, and can easily lead to one feeling emotionally burnt out if it is taken on too literally and seriously. And sometimes that sense of a great emotional responsibility and sensitivity to the collective can also make one want to withdraw from the collective as well. You know, being out in public sometimes with that Sun conjunct Neptune aspect aspect can just make us feel like we are being swamped in the radio static of everyone else's emotions, and that the only way we will achieve any kind of inner clarity or sense of being is by going as far away from that as possible. But because also that craving of the Sun conjunct Neptune is to find a conditional love, and yet physical reality is conditional by nature, that withdrawal also facilitates removing oneself from the painful illusion of physical reality, and instead trying to find salvation within one's own fantasies, within one's own spiritual practices, within meditations that pull one deep inside of oneself, or in negative cases through maladaptive addictions that are meant to be providing that sense of cosmic mothering. But the flip side of this is that instead of just taking on the vocation of being this Christ-like cosmic savior, there can also be the necessary enantiodromia, where we flip to the other side, and instead we feel like we're the personification of all suffering. We are the personification of all the wounds experienced in the world. And rather than feeling like we have any strength to tackle that, we take it all upon ourselves and instead crave that someone else will come along and nurture us and look after us and do all the things and impose all the structure that we do not feel we can give to ourselves. But my advice to anyone undergoing this transit is that if you are feeling very emotional, if you are feeling beset by all kinds of bewildering feelings and dreams and visions, then you should pursue those things and express them. Because if you just try and bottle up and contain that whole inner world of feeling, you will only end up feeling emotionally distressed and will probably end up manifesting some kind of sickness or accident that will isolate you enough where you are able to let those things out. Whereas if you flow along with those Neptunian waters, if you flow along with all the strange existential crises that it can make arise in oneself as to who we are and what we really want from life, and where our desires are taking us, very interesting sources of enlightenment can arise when we have the braveness to surrender to those waters. The waters of Neptune have the power to cleanse us, to offer us an emotional release and purgation. But if we resist, those waters will only have to flood us all the more. If we go along with it and swim with it, then we can experience the healing, cleansing benefit of going along with those bizarre inner tides. Anyway, I don't feel like it's worth trying to be too rational or explicative when talking about such an irrational planet, especially as I will be going into many of these themes much more in depth and probably over a series of videos as I discuss the major transit of Saturn in Pisces, which is beginning tomorrow, March 7th. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want to share any of your own Neptunian experiences and fantasies or responses to this transit, please do. I already have had many people in my life have very intense dreams and prophecies and unexpected visions under the auspices of this transit. If you want to contact me for spiritual counsel, advice, or some kind of astrological reading, my contact details are below. If you want to support me on Patreon and show me a little bit of compassion, please do. And I will look forward to seeing you soon.